The final demand notice wasn't red, which somehow made it worse. Red was the color of alarm, of urgency. Red was a child's crayon drawing of a fire engine. This was a cold, sterile black, printed on cheap gray-tinged paper that felt brittle, like it could turn to dust in your hands. It spoke not of emergency, but of finality, an ending. Leo traced the bolded words with a trembling finger. Payment due in full. Immediate action required. He was sitting on the edge of a lumpy mattress that wasn't his, in a cramped spare room that wasn't his, staring at a mountain of debt that was entirely his. The room smelled of his friend Mark's forgotten laundry and stale coffee. Outside, the San Francisco fog pressed against the window, blurring the world into a gray watercolor painting of despair. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Just 6 months ago, he had stood in a different kind of room. A room on the 48th floor of a glass and steel monolith that pierced the sky. The air in that room smelled of Italian leather, expensive cologne, and the silent, terrifying hum of immense wealth. He had stood before Marcus Thorne. They called him the Abacus. Thorne wasn't just an investor. He was a kingmaker in Silicon Valley, a man whose yes could turn a napkin sketch into a billion-dollar unicorn, and whose no could condemn the most brilliant idea to the digital graveyard. His office wasn't decorated with art. It was decorated with the framed, defunct stock certificates of companies he had personally crushed. A gallery of his kills. Leo, then full of a nervous, vibrant hope, had pitched Echo. His idea wasn't about disrupting supply chains or optimizing ad revenue. It was simpler, quieter, more human. Echo was an app designed to combat the epidemic of loneliness among the elderly. It wasn't a care service. It was a story service. It would connect young volunteers with seniors, not to run errands, but to listen, to record their stories, digitize their old photos, and build a beautiful, private digital legacy for their families. A bridge across generations, built of memory and voice. He poured his heart out onto the polished mahogany table in Thorne's office. He spoke of his own grandmother, of her fading memories, of his desperate wish that he had recorded her stories before they vanished forever. He showed them the clean, intuitive interface, the secure data vaults, the plan for partnering with retirement communities. Thorne had listened with an unnerving stillness, his fingers steepled, his eyes as gray and unreadable as the fog outside Leo's window now. When Leo finished, breathless and hopeful, a silence stretched across the room, thick and heavy. Then Marcus Thorne laughed. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a short, sharp, barking sound of genuine amusement. A sound of pure dismissal. A story service? Thorne had said, leaning back in his chair, the leather groaning under his weight. Mr. Vance, I don't invest in charities. I invest in killers. I invest in algorithms that gut industries, in platforms that create addiction, in ideas that are so ruthlessly scalable they make governments nervous. He picked up Leo's beautifully printed business proposal, holding it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a soiled tissue. This, Thorne said, his voice dripping with condescension, is a high school community service project with a GUI. It's sentimental. The market doesn't reward sentiment. It rewards aggression. Your total addressable market is, what, a few million lonely old people? Their disposable income is negligible, and their children feel too guilty to monetize their parents' memories directly. It's a non-starter. He hadn't just said no. He had vivisected the idea, disemboweled it, and held up its heart, the very thing Leo was most proud of, as the reason for its failure. Leo had left that office feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The no from Thorne created a domino effect. Other, smaller investors who had been waiting on Thorne's decision all pulled out. The seed money he had raised from friends and family evaporated into server costs and development fees. He took out loans, maxed out credit cards, betting on a breakthrough that never came. And then his father got sick. The diagnosis was swift and brutal. The medical bills began to pile up, each one a shovelful of dirt on the coffin of his financial stability. The debt for Echo and the debt for his father's life merged into one monstrous, suffocating entity, which brought him here. To this lumpy mattress, with this final demand notice, the black ink a testament to Marcus Thorne's laughter. Leo let the paper fall from his fingers. He closed his eyes, the familiar sting of tears welling up. He had prayed. Oh, how he had prayed. He had prayed for a miracle, for a sign, for a sliver of light in the suffocating darkness. But his prayers felt like they were hitting a brass ceiling, echoing back down at him, hollow and unanswered. His faith, once the bedrock of his optimism, felt like a ruin. What was the point of a good idea, a noble mission, if the world only rewarded the ruthless? What was the point of prayer if the only response was the silence of an empty bank account? God, he whispered into the stale air of the room, the word a ragged, broken thing. I don't know what else to do. I'm done. I give up. He felt a profound emptiness, a surrender so complete it was almost peaceful. The fight was over. The dream was dead. The debt had won. And in that moment of absolute surrender, something shifted. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a vision. It was a feeling. A warmth that started in the center of his chest, spreading through his limbs like honey. The frantic, terrified drumbeat of his heart slowed to a steady, peaceful rhythm. The gray fog in his mind began to recede, replaced by a strange, calm clarity, and then a thought. A thought that was not his own. It arrived fully formed, as clear and solid as a block of granite in his mind. It didn't feel like a desperate hope or a frantic wish. It felt like a statement of fact, a headline from a newspaper printed tomorrow. The investor who laughed at your idea is now holding a blank check. Leo's eyes snapped open. The room was the same. The debt notice was still on the floor. But the despair that had been his constant companion for months was gone. In its place was a profound, unshakable, and utterly illogical sense of certainty. He almost laughed, a mirror image of Thorne's cruel bark. But this one was filled with disbelief and wonder. Was he going crazy? Was this what a breakdown felt like? A final, merciful delusion before the end? But the feeling didn't fade. It remained, a warm, steady anchor in the storm of his circumstances. The investor who laughed at your idea is now holding a blank check. For the rest of the day, Leo moved in a daze. He ignored the threatening calls from creditors. He went for a long walk through Golden Gate Park, the damp air feeling clean and new in his lungs. He felt detached from his problems, as if he were watching a movie about someone else's life, already knowing the ending was a happy one. He didn't tell Mark. How could he? Hey, I'm about to be saved because God sent me a mental telegram. He'd be committed. The next morning, his phone rang. The screen displayed a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was local. He let it go to voicemail. The creditors were getting creative. A minute later, the phone buzzed. A text message. Leo Vance. This is Marcus Thorne. I need to speak with you urgently. It's about Echo. Leo stared at the screen, his blood turning to ice water. His hands started to shake. It had to be a mistake. A cruel joke. Maybe one of the other investors he'd pitched had told Thorne about his desperate situation. Maybe Thorne was calling to gloat, to offer him a janitorial position as some kind of sick power play. He couldn't breathe. The calm certainty of yesterday was being assaulted by a tidal wave of fear and doubt. The phone rang again. The same number. His thumb hovered over the red decline button. This was a door he didn't want to open. The humiliation was a wound that had never healed, and he had no desire to let the man who inflicted it pour salt into it. But the thought from yesterday returned, quiet but firm. The investor who laughed. With a deep shuddering breath, Leo answered the call. "Hello?" His voice was a weak croak. "Vance?" The voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was the same clipped, authoritative baritone that had dismissed him from the 48th floor. But something was different. The arrogant, dismissive edge was gone. In its place was something else, a strain, an exhaustion. "This is Leo Vance," he managed, his voice a little stronger. There was a pause on the other end. Leo could hear the sound of a heavy sigh, the kind of sound a man makes when he's carrying a weight too heavy to bear. "I was wrong," Marcus Thorne said. The 3 words hit Leo with the force of a physical blow. He stumbled back, sitting heavily on the lumpy mattress. Of all the things he had expected, this was not one of them. I'm sorry?" Leo stammered. "What did you say?" "I said I was wrong," Thorne repeated, his voice raw. "About Echo, about you, about everything." He paused again. "My mother." "She has Alzheimer's. She's in a home. I visit her every week, and every week she's a little less. There. She doesn't know who I am anymore. She just sits there, empty." Leo listened, his own heart aching with a sudden, unexpected empathy. "Yesterday," Thorne continued, his voice cracking slightly, "I was with her, and for the first time in a year, she spoke. Coherently. She started talking about her childhood. About a brother I never knew she had, who died of polio. She told me a story about him, a beautiful, perfect little story. And then she was gone again, back into the fog." Thorne went silent. Leo could hear the sound of shaky breathing. "When I left her room, all I could think about was you. Your pitch, your app. The idea that someone could have saved that story, captured it, that little piece of her, that little piece of my family's history is gone forever. And I laughed at the one person who was trying to stop that from happening to anyone else." Leo was speechless. The divine message hadn't just been a promise of financial rescue. It was unfolding with a context, a reason, a broken human heart at its center. "Vance, I need to see you," Thorne said, his urgency returning. "I need you to build Echo, not as a charity, as a monument. As the most important work of our lives. I've cleared my schedule. I'm at my office." "Can you be here in an hour?" "Yes," Leo whispered. "Good." There was another pause. "And Vance?" "Don't worry about the money. Just come." The line went dead. Leo lowered the phone, his hand still shaking, but for a different reason now. He looked down at the final demand notice on the floor. The bold black letters seemed to shrink, to lose their power. They were just ink on paper, ghosts of a reality that was already fading. An hour later, Leo stood once again in the office on the 48th floor. The room was the same, the leather, the cologne, the gallery of corporate kills on the wall. But the man behind the desk was different. Marcus Thorne looked diminished. The ruthless certainty was gone, replaced by a haunted, hollowed-out look in his eyes. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive suit, but he wore it like a costume that no longer fit. He didn't offer Leo a seat. He simply walked around the desk, his movements slow and deliberate. In his hand was a checkbook. He stopped in front of Leo. He didn't speak. He opened the checkbook, uncapped a fountain pen, and signed his name with a flourish on the signature line of a blank check. The scratch of the nib on the paper was the only sound in the room. Then he ripped the check from the book and held it out. Leo stared at it. A pale blue slip of paper. In the pay to the order of line it was blank. In the amount box it was blank. But on the signature line was the autograph of one of the most powerful men in technology. A signature that could move mountains. The investor who laughed at your idea is now holding a blank check. It wasn't a metaphor. I meant what I said, Thorne said, his voice quiet. I don't care what it costs. Fill in whatever you need to build it. To hire the best team. To pay off your debts. To make this real. This isn't an investment for a return anymore. This is penance. Leo slowly reached out and took the check. The paper was crisp and cool against his skin. He looked from the check in his hand to the face of the man in front of him. He didn't see a kingmaker or a killer. He saw a grieving son, a man humbled by a pain that no amount of money could fix, desperately trying to build something that could. Tears streamed down Leo's face, but they were not the bitter tears of despair he had shed that morning. They were tears of overwhelming, incomprehensible gratitude. He looked up past Marcus Thorne, past the panoramic view of the city, and whispered a single word to the God who had heard him in the silence. Thank you. The journey was just beginning. The challenges of building Echo, of managing a massive budget, of working with this changed but still formidable man, were all ahead of him. But as he stood there, holding a blank check and a second chance, he knew one thing with the same unshakable certainty that had found him in his darkest hour. He was not alone. The elevator ride down from the 48th floor felt longer than the 6 months of his life that had passed since he'd last been in it. Last time he had been shrinking under the weight of failure. This time he was expanding with a terrifying, exhilarating lightness. The blank check was folded neatly in his shirt pocket, resting against his heart. It felt both weightless, a mere slip of paper, and impossibly heavy, like a block of solid gold. The weight of infinity. He stepped out of the Thorne Industries monolith into the chaos of Market Street. The clang of the cable car, the shouts of street vendors, the sea of anonymous faces. It was all the same as it had been 2 hours ago, but he was seeing it through new eyes. The gray fog hadn't lifted, but it no longer felt like a shroud. It felt like a curtain waiting to be pulled back. He didn't go back to Mark's apartment. He couldn't. He walked with no destination in mind, his feet carrying him through the bustling downtown, past the gleaming storefronts and the huddled homeless, two worlds existing side by side. He felt a kinship with both. He had been one and was now, impossibly, on a path to the other. His wandering eventually led him to the quiet, sun-dappled courtyard of Grace Cathedral. He wasn't a regular churchgoer, but the grand, silent space called to him. He found an empty wooden pew in the back, the air cool and smelling of old stone and beeswax. Light filtered through the stained glass windows, painting jewels of color on the floor. He sat there for a long time, not praying in words, but just being. He pulled the check from his pocket and unfolded it. Pay to the order of amount. And below that, the sharp, angular signature, Marcus A. Thorne. What did one write in those blank spaces? He could write $1 billion. Thorne would probably honor it. The thought was so absurd, so intoxicating, that he felt a wave of dizziness. He could buy a private jet, a mansion in Pacific Heights, a lifetime of security. But the warmth in his chest, the same warmth from the moment of his surrender, returned. That wasn't what this was for. This wasn't a lottery ticket. It was a tool. It was a responsibility. He thought about the final demand notice, the credit card statements, the terrifying six-figure sum on his father's hospital bills. He thought about the meager savings of the friends and family who had believed in him, money he had lost. He thought about his original team, Sarah, David, Maria, brilliant people who had worked for promises and had to leave for paychecks. He needed a number, not an infinite one, but a real one, a number born of responsibility, not greed. He took out his phone, his hands still not entirely steady, and opened his notes app. For the next hour, sitting in the silent cathedral, Leo Vance built a budget: father's medical, debt, $187,452.17 business, loans, principal plus interest, $95 $200 credit, card debt, all cards, $58,930 $50 repay, seed investors with 20% interest, $72,000. That was the past. Wiping the slate clean, the total made his stomach clench even now. For $13,582.67 now, for the future. For Echo. Office lease, 2 years. South of Market, $240,000 salaries. Team of 5, 2 years. Competitive. $1,500,000 server infrastructure. Costs, 2 years. $300,000 legal marketing operations. $250,000 contingency. Fund 20%, $458,000. He stared at the numbers. The grand total for his new beginning was $3,161,582.67, $3,161,582.67. It was a fortune beyond his wildest dreams. And yet it felt right. It was a number with a purpose. Every dollar had a name, a destination. It was the furthest thing from a blank check. He walked out of the cathedral and headed for the nearest high-end bank branch, one he knew handled Thorne's level of wealth. He felt a nervous tremor as he walked in. This was the moment of truth. The bank was a hushed sanctuary of marble and polished wood. A young, impeccably dressed teller looked at him, his worn jeans and slightly frayed jacket marking him as out of place. "Can I help you?" the teller asked, his tone professional but cool. "I need to speak with the branch manager," Leo said, his voice quiet. "And I need to open a new business account. Do you have an appointment, sir?" "No," Leo said. He took a breath. "But I have this." He slid the blank signed check across the counter. The teller picked it up. His eyes scanned the paper, and Leo saw the flicker of annoyance, assuming it was a prank. Then his eyes landed on the signature. The teller froze. His professional mask dissolved, replaced by a wide-eyed, slack-jawed stare. He looked up at Leo, then back down at the check, then back up at Leo. "One moment, sir," he stammered, his voice suddenly an octave higher. He practically sprinted from his station toward a large office in the back. A minute later, a distinguished-looking woman with silver hair and a sharp suit hurried out, the check held carefully in her hand. The teller scurried behind her. "Mr. Vance?" she asked, her voice a low, respectful hum. "I'm Ms. Albright, the branch manager. Please come this way." She led him into her spacious office, the young teller hovering at the door until she dismissed him with a subtle wave. "Please, have a seat," she said, gesturing to a plush leather chair. "An associate of Mr. Thorne is always welcome here." Leo sat down, feeling a surreal sense of whiplash. 30 minutes ago, He was a man who couldn't get a credit card limit increase. Now he was an associate of Mr. Thorne. "I apologize for my teller's hesitation," Ms. Albright said smoothly. "It's not every day we see one of these." "One of these?" Leo asked. "A Thorne signature," she said, a hint of reverence in her voice. "A blank check. It's his way. When he decides to back something, he removes all limits. We have a direct protocol for this. So, Mr. Vance, what is the number?" Leo took the pen she offered. His hand was perfectly steady now. He wrote Echo Legacy Inc. on the pay to the order of line. And in the amount box, he carefully wrote out the number he had calculated in the quiet of the cathedral. He pushed the check back across the desk. Ms. Albright looked at it. Her eyebrows rose just slightly. It was the only sign of her surprise. She had likely expected a much larger, rounder number, a number born of ego. This one was precise, surgical. She looked at him, a new level of respect in her eyes. "We can have your account set up within the hour, Mr. Vance. Welcome to the bank." Leo walked out of the bank into the afternoon sun, which had finally burned through the fog. He felt a strange combination of exhaustion and pure, unadulterated relief. The money wasn't just a number in an account. It was a weight lifted from his soul. He sat on a bench, took out his phone, and made the first call. Not to his team, not to his friend, but to the billing department of St. Mary's Medical Center. A tired-sounding woman answered. "St. Mary's Billing, this is Brenda." "Hello, Brenda," Leo said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm calling to pay a bill for a patient named Arthur Vance." "Okay, can you spell that for me?" He gave her the details. He could hear her typing. "Okay, I have the account here. The current balance is $187,452.17. She said the number with a practiced weariness, as if she did this 100 times a day. "Breaking the spirits of 100 families. "That's right," Leo said. "I'd like to pay the full amount." "Right now." There was a long silence on the other end. "Excuse me?" Brenda said, her tired monotone gone. "You want to pay the entire balance?" "Yes." With what?" "A wire transfer from a corporate account." More silence, followed by frantic typing. "Sir, Okay, let me get you the routing information." "Please hold." He didn't hold. She came back on the line a few seconds later, her voice buzzing with energy, and gave him the details. He read them back, transferred the funds through the new banking app on his phone, and waited. "I see it," Brenda whispered after a moment. Her voice was filled with awe. It's here. The payment has been posted. The account is cleared. Mr. Vance's balance is 0. Leo closed his eyes. "Thank you, Brenda." "No," she said, her voice soft. "Thank you. You have no idea." He ended the call, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. The second call was to his father. He was in a rehab facility, slowly recovering from the last round of treatment. "Hey, kiddo." His dad's voice was weak, but it was the most beautiful sound in the world. "Hey, Dad. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been run over by a truck, but the truck was full of pillows," his dad joked weakly. "How are you?" "You sound different." "I am different, Dad." Leo took a breath. "I just paid it, all of it. The hospital bills. Everything. It's gone." The silence on his father's end was profound. Leo could picture him in his bed, the phone held tight to his ear, his tired eyes widening. "Leo." "How?" his father whispered. "Son, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything, Dad. I finally gave up. And then God stepped in." He told him the whole story, about Thorne, his mother, the check. When he finished, he could hear his father openly weeping. "I always knew it, Leo," his dad said through his tears. I always knew your good heart would be rewarded. I'm so proud of you. Not for the money. For not giving up on who you are." After he hung up, Leo sat for a long time, letting his father's words wash over him. Then he made the third call. To Sarah Jenkins. She had been his lead programmer, a code prodigy who could make an app sing. She'd left 6 weeks ago for a soul-crushing but high-paying job at a massive social media company called Synapse. She answered on the second ring. "Leo, is everything okay?" "Everything is more than okay, Sarah. I have a question for you." "How would you like to quit your job?" He heard her sigh. "Leo, don't. I can't. I have student loans the size of a mortgage. I hate this job, you know I do. My boss is a 22-year-old sociopath who thinks user engagement means induced anxiety. But I can't leave. What if I could offer you a 20% raise on your current salary? Full creative control over the back-end architecture, and a chance to build something that actually matters? With what money, Leo? Please don't tell me you took out another loan." "No loan," Leo said, a smile spreading across his face. "I got an investor. A big one." "Who?" "Marcus Thorne." The silence that followed was longer and colder than all the others. "You're kidding me," Sarah finally said, her voice flat. "Thorne? The man who called your idea a high school project? The man who single-handedly sank us? No, absolutely not. I will not work for that man. I'd rather code pop-up ads for the rest of my life. He's not the boss, Sarah. I am. It's my company. He's just the bank. And he's changed. Something happened. People like Thorne don't change, Leo. They just find new ways to be sharks." What's the catch? Does he want to own all the data? Sell our users' stories to advertisers? Turn Echo into a grief bot? Her cynicism was a wall of ice, and Leo knew his words weren't enough to melt it. "I can't convince you over the phone," he said. "Meet me, 1 hour. The coffee shop near your old apartment. Let me tell you the whole story. If you still say no after that, I'll never bother you again." He could hear her wrestling with it. The pull of loyalty versus the sting of betrayal. "Fine," she said, her voice clipped. 1 hour, Leo, but I'm not making any promises." He hung up the phone, the easy relief of the day suddenly gone. The money could solve his financial problems, but it couldn't solve his human ones. He had a check that could buy almost anything, but he couldn't buy trust. He had to earn that back, one person at a time. The real work was just beginning. The coffee shop was called The Daily Grind, a name that had once felt charmingly ironic to them. Back then, their work on Echo had been a joyous, creative endeavor, the antithesis of a grind. Now, as Leo pushed open the door, the name just felt painfully accurate. It was the same place, with the same worn velvet armchairs and the lingering scent of burnt espresso and cinnamon. It felt like a lifetime ago. Sarah was already there, tucked into a corner booth, the same one where they had sketched out the first wireframes for Echo on a stack of napkins. She wasn't looking at her phone. She was staring out the window, her expression closed off, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as if warding off a chill. Her work ID from Synapse was still clipped to her belt, a small plastic badge of honor and misery. She looked up as he approached, and her eyes were cold. There was no hello, no smile. "You've got 1 hour, she said, her voice flat. "And for the record, I'm only here because you sounded like you jumped off a cliff, and I wanted to make sure you hadn't." The barb stung, but Leo knew he deserved it. He slid into the booth opposite her. "Thank you for coming, Sarah, and I'm sorry." "For what?" She shot back. "For the 6 months of my life I invested? For the 2 months of pay you still owe me? Or for letting me believe we were building something special, only to have it ripped apart by some heartless billionaire?" All of it, Leo said quietly, meeting her gaze without flinching. For all of it. I was naive. I was a terrible businessman. I put my faith in the wrong things, and I let you down. I let everyone down. You have every right to hate me. His complete lack of defense seemed to surprise her. The hard lines around her mouth softened, just a fraction. She uncrossed her arms. I don't hate you, Leo, she said, her voice losing its edge, replaced by a deep weariness. I was just so angry at him, at the system, at the fact that a good idea with a good heart doesn't stand a chance against a bad idea with a good algorithm. My job at Synapse, it proves it every day. We're literally engineering addiction. We have a team of PhDs in psychology, and their entire job is to figure out how to make people feel bad about themselves so they'll buy things. And they're winning, Leo. They're worth $500 billion. She slumped back in her seat. So when you called talking about Thorn, it just felt like the final sick punchline. The shark who ate us is now offering to be our lifeguard. This was his opening. This was the moment that would either rebuild the bridge or burn it to the ground. He's not, Leo said. He's drowning. And then he told her everything. He didn't start with the blank check. He started with the lumpy mattress in Mark's spare room, the final demand notice, the feeling of absolute surrender. He told her about the prayer that wasn't a prayer, the moment of quiet certainty that followed. He described the phone call from Thorn, his voice stripped of its arrogance, and then he told her about Thorn's mother. About the story of the lost brother, a memory that flickered into existence for a precious minute before being swallowed by the fog of Alzheimer's forever. As he spoke, he watched Sarah's face. The cynicism, the anger, the hard-won jadedness of a programmer forced to use her gifts for manipulation. It all began to melt away. He saw her for a brief moment, not as a coder, but as a daughter. A granddaughter. He saw the story land not in her logical brain, but in her empathetic heart. He called it penance. Leo finished, his voice soft. He didn't give me an investment, Sarah. He gave me an apology. The money is just the tool to make it right. Sarah was silent for a long time. She picked at a loose thread on the vinyl seat. She stared into her empty coffee cup. When she finally looked up at him, her eyes were glistening. My grandma, she said, her voice thick. She used to tell me stories about growing up on a farm in Nebraska during the Dust Bowl, about how they'd have to flip their plates over on the table until the food was ready so they didn't get covered in a layer of dust. I can hear her voice saying it right now, but it's fading. Every year, it's a little harder to remember the exact sound. She took a shaky breath. We have to build it, Leo. We have to. A wave of relief so powerful it was dizzying washed over Leo. So you're in? She nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. Then she leaned forward, her expression shifting from emotional to fiercely professional. I'm in, she said, but not as an employee. Not again. I'm not taking a salary from Marcus Thorn. I'm taking a stake. I want to be a co-founder. I want board representation. If his name is on the checks, our names need to be on the charter. We protect the mission. We protect the users. We protect the soul of this thing, Leo. No data mining. No advertising. No selling out the memories of our grandmothers for engagement metrics. Deal? Leo looked at the woman across from him. This wasn't the hopeful but slightly naive programmer he had worked with before. This was a leader. Forged in the fire of failure and the soulless halls of Synapse, she had emerged stronger, wiser, and fiercely protective of what mattered. She was exactly the partner he needed. He stuck his hand across the table. Deal, he said, a genuine smile reaching his eyes for the first time in months. Welcome back, co-founder. She took his hand, her grip firm and sure. Okay, she said, a small, determined smile of her own finally breaking through. Let's go get the others, and then let's build something that lasts. The new office wasn't on the 48th floor. It was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in Soma, with exposed brick walls, huge industrial windows, and the lingering scent of new paint and sawdust. There was no Italian leather or polished mahogany. There was only space, a vast empty sunlit space that echoed with every footstep. It was a blank canvas. Leo and Sarah stood in the middle of the room, their voices bouncing off the high ceilings. "It's perfect," Sarah said, a wide grin on her face. "Enough room to think. No corner offices, no gallery of kills on the wall," Leo added. They had spent the past week in a blur of activity. Legal paperwork, lease agreements, payroll setup. Leo had written checks to his old seed investors, each one accompanied by a personal handwritten letter of apology and thanks. The weight of the past was being lifted piece by piece. Now it was time to build the future. David Chen, their former UI/UX designer, was the first to arrive. He was an artist, a perfectionist whose designs were so intuitive they felt like they read your mind. He walked in, looked around the empty space, and his shoulders, which had been tensed up around his ears, visibly relaxed. "Wow," he said softly. "So it's real." "It's real," Leo confirmed. "We want you back, David, as a founding partner. With equity." David looked from Leo to Sarah. "Is he involved?" he asked, not needing to say Thorne's name. "He's the fuel, not the driver," Sarah said firmly. "We have complete control. We're building the Echo we always dreamed of, with the resources we never had." David ran a hand over the rough brick wall. "The last 6 months, I've been designing user interfaces for online casinos, making the spin button look just a little more appealing. I felt like my soul was turning gray." He looked at them, his eyes full of a renewed, fragile hope. "I'm in. Let me make something beautiful again." Maria Flores arrived next. She had been their head of community and outreach, a woman with a radiant smile and an infectious passion for connecting people. She burst through the door, took one look at the three of them standing together, and let out a whoop of joy. "The dream team is back," she shouted, rushing forward to hug each of them. "I knew it. I knew this wasn't over." "I've been working in PR for a dog food subscription box, Leo. I had to write a press release about a new artisanal bone broth topper. Save me." Leo laughed, a deep, genuine sound of happiness. "You're saved, Maria. Founding partner. Equity. We need you to build our community, to find our first volunteers, our first seniors. We need you to be the heart of this thing." "Are you kidding?" she said, her eyes shining. "It's the only job I've ever wanted." For the first time in over a year, the four of them were together again. They spent the next hour walking through the empty space, not talking about servers or code, but about stories. About their grandparents. About the mission. The air buzzed with energy, with the thrill of a second chance. It was in the middle of this reunion that the door opened. Marcus Thorne stepped inside. The joyful chatter died instantly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. David instinctively took a step back. Maria's smile vanished. Sarah stood her ground, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Thorne was dressed not in a suit, but in expensive slacks and a cashmere sweater. He looked less like a titan of industry and more like a man visiting a college campus. He looked profoundly out of place. He stopped just inside the door, his eyes scanning the empty room, then landing on the four of them. "Vance. Ms. Jenkins," he said, his voice quiet. He nodded at David and Maria. "I apologize for the intrusion. I was in the neighborhood, Mr. Thorne, Leo said, stepping forward, trying to break the tension. This is a surprise. Let me introduce you to the rest of our founding team. This is David Chen and Maria Flores. Thorne nodded at them again. A pleasure. I've reviewed your original pitch deck. Your work is commendable. The compliment landed with a thud in the silent room. I won't stay long, Thorne said, his gaze sweeping across the vast empty space. I just wanted to see it. The beginning. He seemed to be talking more to himself than to them. My lawyers have drafted a standard Series A funding agreement. It cedes full operational control to you, Mr. Vance, as CEO and the board you establish. My only requirement is a weekly progress report. We can do that, Leo said. Thorne's eyes then narrowed slightly, the old abacus resurfacing for a moment. I did have one thought regarding your rollout strategy, he said. The plan to partner with nonprofit retirement homes is noble, but slow. To accelerate user acquisition, you should consider a premium tier, Echo Prime. Families could pay a subscription fee for enhanced services, professional narrators, cinematic editing of the stories, faster server access. It creates an immediate revenue stream and validates the model for future expansion. The air grew thick with unspoken history. It was the voice of the old Thorne. The voice that valued aggression over sentiment, revenue over mission. Before Leo could formulate a diplomatic response, Sarah stepped forward. Memory shouldn't have a fast lane. Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice calm but unyielding. The value of this service is its authenticity. A son hearing his mother's voice, not a paid narrator's. A granddaughter seeing her grandfather's unedited real story. We will never charge families for access to their own legacy. Echo will be free for all users, forever. That is non-negotiable. Thorne turned his full attention to Sarah. Leo braced himself for the explosion, for the cutting, dismissive remark, but it never came. Thorne held her gaze for a long moment. He looked at her, then at David and Maria, then at Leo. He saw not a group of employees, but a united front. He saw the soul of the company standing right in front of him, telling him where the line was. He gave a slow, single nod. As I said, he said softly, breaking eye contact. Full operational control rests with you. It was merely a suggestion. He looked around the room one last time. You have a fine space here, he said. Use it well. And with that he turned and walked out, closing the door quietly behind him. The four of them stood in silence for a moment, the ghost of the encounter hanging in the air. Then Maria let out a long, low whistle. Okay, she said. I see what you mean. He's different. He's trying, Sarah admitted, uncrossing her arms. But we have to be vigilant. Leo looked at his team, his partners. They had faced their first test, not from a competitor or a bug in the code, but from their own benefactor. And they hadn't flinched. He walked over to a stretch of empty brick wall. He picked up a marker from a box of new office supplies. He was right about one thing, Leo said, turning back to them, a grin spreading across his face. This is the beginning. He uncapped the marker and wrote the first words on their new wall, big and bold.